1:30 Eastern here on Tuesday, the 15th of April. Happy tax day. Welcome inside the vault for a Ravens lunch hour live stream. We're a little bit late than usual just because the Ravens just dropped off, just finished up their annual pre-draft press conference. Of course, we're 9 days out from the NFL draft. John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta conducted this annual press conference from one winning drive. If only the live chat knew and understood and had a little bit of empathy for how long and how tedious the turnaround time is, Sarah. You know, anybody want to come edit for us, Mike or Tila? Anybody else talking junk in the live chat? Why don't you come edit for us? All in good fun. We're glad to be back with you. We are going instant reaction prior to my dentist appointment. You'll take us home. I'll go for the first 30 or so. But here's what we're going to get into. It's a curveball that was thrown by Eric DeCosta as it relates to Mark Andrews going into draft weekend. It's an off-season conversation or conversations that have been had with Lamar Jackson, most of which have been kept private. Player futures, Darius Washington, future at kicker, a Derrick Henry extension, all that was addressed. Big picture stuff like the middle rounds being the sweet spot, drafting strategy, so on and so forth. There's a lot to get to. We're about to do exactly that. Great to see you, partner.
Good to see you. This is nice that we finally got to hear from Eric DeCosta and all of them on the draft. Bobby, I was watching the live chat. I loved seeing everybody say, Voltrons assemble. We're headed over to the vault. Going to see Bobby and Sarah there. I feel like, what time did that press conference end? About 12:45?
Something like that.
Something like that. We turned this around in 45 minutes. It's pretty good. That's pretty dang good. So I'm excited to get to it. And Bobby, at this point, Eric DeCosta, I feel like, is trolling us. He's trolling us when it comes to his all-pro tight end. He knows the chatter that's been going on, and the chatter's been there because his contract and that he's $16 million cap hit. And he kind of left the door open for business earlier in the offseason. And then John Harbaugh comes in during the owners' meetings, and he's emphatic. No, Mark Andrews, I fully expect Mark Andrews to be a part of the team this year. And so they just wanted to follow up because Eric DeCosta is the one who can make the trades. Ultimately, it's his decision. He will obviously listen to John Harbaugh, but he's the GM. He assembles the roster. And so while John Harbaugh came out emphatically saying, yes, indeed, Mark Andrews will be back, Eric DeCosta kind of repeated what he did earlier in the offseason in terms of being non-committal. But this time, the answer was long and winding, much longer, much more winding. And I feel like he's playing games. I feel like he's playing games at this point. Let's listen to what he said about whether or not he fully expects Mark Andrews to be a part of the roster in 2025.
Oh, man. I never know what's going to happen, Jeff. And I would never want to say this or that. But I can tell you this, Mark Andrews is a warrior, and he's played his butt off for us, and his competitiveness, his talent, his attitude, his leadership is so valued here. And he's a great player, and I think we're in the business of keeping as many great players as we can. So there's always a lot of unpredictability with the draft. You just never know.
I like the good cop, bad cop thing that's going on here.
Oh, you didn't play the whole thing. There's nothing that was amazing.
Well, he went on to talk about, there wasn't much after that. He went on to talk about.
What's after that is what's funny.
What? Asking him, the Marquise Brown, looking back at whether or not he's traded a player mid-draft in his history.
Yes, that's where I think the trolling starts to come in. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, he went on to say, and most of you guys probably have listened to the press conference, but yeah, if you view, I didn't interpret it that way. I see where you're going with it. He asked the media, the hypothetical, have we ever traded a player mid-draft? And of course, Jameson and a bunch of other people speak up, and Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, and he's like, oh no, that was actually pre-draft. That was the Monday pre-draft.
Well, John Harbaugh comes in and he's like, oh, well, we actually did that before the draft. And John Harbaugh starts trolling his own GM. He's like, oh yeah, like the day before the draft. He's like, it's the day before. And then Eric's like, well, actually it was the Monday before the draft. Like it was this whole back and forth that I thought was hilarious, that I think he's like I think he's playing with technicalities on that one. That when you don't announce it until the draft and you're doing that for strategic reasons, like nobody here is claiming, oh, you just decided on draft night that you got this random phone call in the middle of the draft from Arizona and they're like, hey, we'd love to trade Marquise Brown. Like, I'm pretty sure we all knew, and even Lamar Jackson earlier that day, because remember, Lamar Jackson put out a tweet and he acted like he was surprised. And so the press came to John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta that night in the draft and said, hey, Lamar Jackson looks surprised. Did you guys not tell him? And they're like, no, we told him. And then Lamar later said, yeah, I knew, but I still wanted to express, how much I hated losing him. So we already knew that the deal had been done before the draft, but it was made official on the draft. So I feel like Eric DeCosta was trolling a little bit in terms of being like using these technicalities. And he's trying to say, well, have we ever drafted anybody on draft day, as if he hasn't, when like it kind of was though, like the timing of it when you guys decided versus when you like announced it, it's because you were doing it strategically for the draft, that you didn't want to announce it until that time for a reason. And so that could happen again with Mark Andrews. Like you could claim, like if it was the Monday before the draft, right, that he made that decision to make a trade. Well, we haven't hit the Monday before the draft. So he's trying to say, have I ever done that before? Well, then fine. We'll change the question. Will you come up with a trade that you won't on Monday that you won't announce until the draft? And basically he was non-committal. And
everything is calculated.
And so it's all calculated, but here's the point. This little calculated game that he's playing, would he do it with Lamar Jackson?
Of course not.
No.
And we talked about that during the combine.
And there's a reason for it, right? Like you wouldn't play those games with somebody that you really were like, not a chance. Not a chance in Hades would I trade him. So are we still sitting here today that there's a probability, a higher probability that Mark Andrews will be on the roster than not? Yes, I would say there's a higher probability than not that he will be on the roster in 2025. However, he wouldn't leave the door open for Lamar Jackson. He wouldn't do it. But he is leaving it open for Mark Andrews for a reason, because my interpretation is that while I still think it's more likely that he'll be a part of the roster, I think Eric DeCosta is still leaving the door open if a good opportunity presents himself. I don't think he's out there trying to get rid of him. I don't think he's out there saying, I'll take any deal whatsoever that may come my way. I don't think that. But he's still saying, in essence, I'm open to conversations if you can offer value to me that would make sense for my roster. But there is no value to him that would say I'm letting Lamar Jackson go.
There's a reason why this thing's been labeled that good old liar's luncheon over the years. But if there was one truth told, the unpredictability thing that he talked about when it comes to Mark Andrews, yeah, you know that's potentially a factor that could be in play come draft weekend. And if that phone starts ringing, Sarah, with something of value, to your point, you got to think that they're going to be picking it up and at least listening on the other end.
And I do just want to do another shout out to Aline, maybe a little bit nicer than I did last time. But respectfully, Aline, don't put words in my mouth. I never said I don't want Mark Andrews on the team. I have never said that. I am reading the tea leaves of the Ravens GM, of what the Ravens GM just did. And he's trolling us, and he's leaving the door open for Mark Andrews to be traded. Never once, ever on this show have I said, I want to trade Mark Andrews. Go back all the way back to the beginning of the offseason. I've never said that. Don't put words. Don't misrepresent me. I don't want to misrepresent you. You don't need to misrepresent me. The GM is non-committal. That's what we're commenting on.
Elsewhere with Derrick Henry, he remains under contract for the 2025 season after he signed that 2-year deal last free agency in 2024. It obviously went really well, and the team wants to keep him around. But with Saquon Barkley's recent contract extension in Philadelphia, does that muddy the water a little bit? He was asked, Eric was, about where things stand. And you have the transcription here. Quote, we have a lot of different balls in the air right now. Deflected. He deflected it. That's what I would say on that. I'm not going to say what we're doing behind the scenes business-wise with these guys. We've talked about in recent weeks, though, Sarah, how Saquon's deal potentially may have affected things. We brought up the market. We brought up all the running backs. What was the top 10? Maybe the list is what you brought up in terms of AAV, average annual value. But I guess moral of the story here, whether it was Derrick or whether it was two of the players that are eligible for fifth-year options, that's two former first-round picks in Kyle Hamilton and Tyler Linderbaum, he decided, he remained essentially non-committal. Deflection City.
You said you think he's non-committal on Derrick?
Meaning to the question.
Yeah, no, he's been very committed to Derrick. That's the difference between
to the question that was posed.
But he's answered the question before.
Of course.
Where he's very committed to Derrick. This is very different from the Mark Andrews situation. Very different. Like when they asked him about Derrick Henry before, he said, well, I've got a picture. When they asked him if he was going to be a Raven, retire a Raven, or at least finish his career in Baltimore, if that's what he wants him to do, if that's what he wants to have happen, he's like, well, I'm hanging a picture of him in my office. Like, what does that tell you? So he's definitely been committed. He's definitely committed to Derrick Henry. What he's not committed to doing is giving you an update on his business discussions with every single guy that he's in contract talks with. And so I didn't expect an answer on this one, but what I find more interesting is that he's saying he's juggling basically a lot of contracts in the air right now. He's got the draft coming too. But I think later in that answer, he kind of alluded to the idea that he's got some guys that he wants to be re-signing, who I, thought like, well, he's got two fifth or players coming up where he's going to have to make a decision on their fifth-year options. So there's Kyle Hamilton, there's Tyler Linderbaum, there's obviously Derrick Henry, and then there's Lamar Jackson. And so he's got the draft coming up in, less than 2 weeks. And he's got all these guys that he's trying to get their contracts done. And he doesn't want to let you know all the progress that's going on there. But I think he's committed to almost all of those guys.
What about the progress on Ardarius Washington?
Well, I'm confident, fairly confident that Ardarius will be back. I don't know that it affects our decision-making at the position at all. And I think it's a pretty deep safety crew. And there's, obviously the top guys, but then there's maybe 4 or 5 or 6 guys that will probably be, third, fourth, fifth round guys that are good players. I mean, this is a really nice pool of players to pick from. I think we definitely will look at that. I think we added the 2 young guys last year. Both guys play well for us on special teams, Bo and Sanusi. But it's a good group of players this year. And again, a position I mentioned corner. I would probably guess that of our 11 picks, at least one of those would be a safety.
So that calculated gamble we talked about last month when it comes to Ardarius Washington, Sarah, so far so good. He has not yet been signed to an offer sheet. He's, again, a restricted free agent, and sure looks like that, again, that calculated risk that the Ravens took last month. Not that it's comparable to placing the non-exclusive franchise tag on Lamar years ago in terms of the price and the player and whatnot, but they understood the market, and it seems like that's the case this go around as well.
Yeah, which we knew that calculated risk was the right one, right? Remember us saying that. However, Bobby, you had said, and I had agreed with you a while ago, that Ardarius Washington wasn't a lock to be a starter. Although it's looking pretty good, right? But it's not a lock depending on what they do in the draft, right? And I kind of feel like Eric DeCosta is right there with you. You know what I mean? Where he's saying, yeah, I'm confident he'll be back, and that's not going to deter anything I do in the draft. And so he talked there. You could hear him say that it's a deep safety crew. He said there's obviously the top guys. We know who they were. We've talked about them ad nauseum because some of the more popular draft gurus keep projecting, Malachi Starks or Eamon Wari or Watts to the Ravens. And so he goes on to say, well, there's also a ton of guys. He said maybe 4 or 5 or 6 guys in the rounds 3 through 5. And so now if he's drafting somebody in the 5th round, then I'd say, okay, I feel more like Ardarius Washington is a lock to be a starter this year. But if he ends up getting Malachi Starks or Eamon Wari, then it's like, then Ardarius Washington's starting role is in jeopardy, although that doesn't mean they're not going to use him. Like, he's still going to be a major part of the team. But that's the only reason why we didn't call him a lock before. It depends on, are you getting somebody in the 5th round, or are you going to take one of those first rounders?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. When he said, paraphrasing, right, to what I think you're getting at here, that none of the Ardarius situation is going to impact the draft. I'm like, okay, this kind of reaffirms, there's a little bit of validation there from that conversation earlier on in the offseason. So that'll be something to follow going into draft weekend. But again, just to reiterate, guaranteed, all but guaranteed, they will be drafting at least one safety, at least one cornerback.
Yeah.
So let's keep it moving here. Talk about Ronnie Stanley. You transcribed on why Eric re-signed him instead of going with the potential youth movement like he did everywhere else on the offensive line, including last year at right tackle with Roger Rosengarten, which has really worked out well through one small sample size year. And the transcription reads as follows: left tackles don't grow on trees. Ronnie had one of his best years last year, and looking out at the draft and free agency, we just didn't see a lot of guys that we felt are better than him. And then obviously when you saw the free agent market, Sarah, and what he ultimately signed for less in Baltimore for, it all kind of matches up there. Nothing surprising about Eric's reasoning here.
Yeah, not at all. And yeah, he was like, when you're later in the draft, there might be 6 guys you could start right away at left tackle. And he didn't say specifically about this draft. He's like, a draft can maybe have 6. He's like, but when we're drafting 27 or in the later 20s, he's like, they're not making it to us. So he's like, we're looking around. Yeah, nobody's better than Ronnie Stanley. But that does say a lot about Stanley, about the year he just had, because 2-3 years ago, he wouldn't have said that, right? He couldn't have said that given his injuries. And so great turnaround for him. And there's been a youth movement along the offensive line, which we'll talk about later. But Ronnie is the only one who hasn't been cut due to that youth movement, which says a lot about how well he played last year.
And that now brings us to Justin Tucker. And of course, this kind of hangs in the balance with the NFL's ongoing investigation. Here is the idea of drafting a kicker. Would it be worth it from Eric DeCosta's perspective?
Is it worth it? I think it's worth it. Sure. I mean, there's been some great kickers drafted, and we've drafted a couple punters, but it's worth it if you have the right kicker. It just depends on the board. It depends on the player. It depends who's there. It depends on how your coaches see them. And also it should be said that some of the greatest kickers of all time weren't drafted, right? So there's no blueprint for finding a kicker, except you got to be able to evaluate the kicker. And I think Randy Brown does a phenomenal job of evaluating kickers. And we have a lot of other really good coaches who do a great job of evaluating talent along with our scouts. And so is it worth it? I think it probably is if the right guy's there. However, you don't have to draft a kicker. You don't have to draft a punter. You don't have to draft a running back or a linebacker for those guys to be great players. We've seen that over and over again.
And Sarah, the follow-up to this, and a lot of GMs speak here, right? Gamemanship going into draft weekend and whatnot. But he was asked if he expects to draft the kicker. That was the follow-up to the answer that you just heard. And he said he never has those kinds of expectations, doesn't want to pigeonhole the team or himself into drafting a certain position. So we've had at least, whether it's quick hits or secondary topics in recent days, of at least one private workout that's been reported with a college prospect kicker.
Fitzgerald.
Yep, Fitzgerald out of Florida State, if memory serves. So we know that at least is out there as a story that deserves our attention.
And to add on to what he said, he's like, at the end of the day, he's like, is it worth it? Well, if you've evaluated him and you think it's worth it, that's fine. But the other part to that is, if you've evaluated all the kickers and other teams have, and you both know that you're after a certain guy, then and you think they might draft him, then that's going to make you draft him, right? That's why quarterbacks are all drafted in the first round, left tackles, pass rushers. It's not just because you've evaluated them and think they're good. It's also because it's tough to find quarterbacks. And so you have to use premium draft picks on that. And so it's also going to be who they think could be their competition. If he feels like no other team will draft a kicker, and he feels pretty good about his ability to recruit somebody in the undrafted free agency market and saying, hey, we are moving on from Justin Tucker. You need to come here because we can give you a starter role, and you'll be a starter role on a Super Bowl caliber team. And we'll give you, an X bonus, So if he feels like nobody else is going to do it, then he can enter that put on that recruiting hat and try to get somebody through undrafted free agency.
He also made sure to tout Randy Brown's longtime efforts when it comes to cultivating, scouting, trying to evaluate kickers. And obviously Justin, as we all remember, was an undrafted guy, and he was discovered by Jerry Rosberg, who, of course, longtime special teams assistant in Baltimore. What was it, 2 years ago, a year ago, when we were in Vegas? We caught up with Tom Pelissero right after he had just tweeted out that they were in potential talks, Rosberg and the Ravens, about a game management type of role, and that ended up going sideways. But regardless, these were the Justin Tucker kicker conversations from today's press conference. Good time to take a quick pause.
But one last thing on veterans before we go to super chats and all that. Just to note, he was asked about whether he's going to exercise the fifth-year options for Tyler Linderbaum and Kyle Hamilton. The deadline is a couple weeks away, May 1st, and he would not reveal that. So my prediction, I could be wrong, fifth-year option on Tyler Linderbaum. Never mind. Centers are very expensive. I don't think there will be a fifth-year option on Tyler Linderbaum because centers, their average money is for the entire offensive line. And so centers themselves are much cheaper than guards and tackles, but in terms of the fifth-year option, it's the average of those. And so I think it'd be tough there, but we'll see.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Obviously the guarantee though is you want to keep Kyle around for as long as possible. Super chats, just two quick ones. One, we have a new member and somebody who never misses a show, seemingly. Monica Reinsfelder, we appreciate you for being here. Thank you for signing up for our new channel membership feature that we rolled out last month. We've got over 70 and counting. It's a great way to support the channel. It's also a great way to get a little something back from us. You can go visit the show notes. Also a pinned comment right now in the live chat. You click that link. You can learn more about becoming a Voltron. There's 3 different tiers, 3 different levels of membership to choose from. And we appreciate you very much. Sod Blitz 34, Sarah's calling it now.
He says, I'm still calling Andrews to the LA Chargers.
Going with the trend of the last several years. Ravens West. Really going out on a limb there, Sod. Appreciate you and appreciate all of you guys for being with us on this Tuesday edition of a little bit later Ravens Lunch Hour live stream, because we are instantly reacting to the Ravens annual pre-draft press conference that was conducted by Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh earlier this morning. It started at 11:45 at One Winning Drive. With that, let's get into the draft portion of things, Sarah. We know that Lamar Jackson and Eric DeCosta have a relationship, and it's a unique one. That's for sure. We learned a lot about it during the contract saga and just how private somehow these two kept things during that negotiation process. We also learned during that process that Lamar had not only had some wishes, Odell, DeAndre, South Floridian prospects, right? As many South Floridian prospects as possible. They all joke about that with how many guys hail from South Florida that have come in and around Baltimore since Lamar was drafted. But clearly he also has his sights set in recent years and has shared these types of conversations with Eric on wide receivers and different guys that he likes coming out of school. And while there wasn't a whole lot to share this year in terms of what Eric was willing to give up about what he has said, he did have this to say.
Lamar and I have texted a little bit. We had a conversation. We didn't get into any specific players. We talked a little bit about the roster and just what he's up to, and his vision and his excitement for the season and all that stuff that goes into it. But other than that, I think I just probably keep the conversations private.
I know in the past Lamar's sent him some texts of some guys or whatnot, but it doesn't sound like he's doing that right now. And so I think that's fine. I don't think it's Lamar's job to be scouting. You know what I mean? For Eric DeCosta, if he happens to like somebody, I think it's fine for him to send it over his way. But I do like that he's listening to Lamar in terms of his vision and things like that. I'm more interested in his long-term contract, but this is a draft press conference, so they didn't get really into that.
Sure, but there was obviously tons of draft nuggets, and you're of course talking about the 2 extensions that still loom out there that we've been trying to get down to the bottom of throughout my travels and our conversations with different guests and insiders this offseason, the Derrick Henry and the Lamar extension, for those that haven't necessarily been following along. But Eric, I tell you what, I think, Sarah, with 11 total picks, and maybe it's a good time to remind you that, and let's actually do this so that everybody sees what it is that the Ravens are working with come draft weekend, which is next weekend, hard to believe, weekend after Easter. They have 11 total picks, 1 in the first, 27th overall, 1 in the second, 1 in the third, 2 in the fourth, 1 in the fifth, 4 in the sixth, and 1 in the seventh. But those day 2 and day 3 picks, you better believe Eric's just chomping at the bit to start to put his scouting efforts and everybody around him to work come next weekend.
The way that I look at the draft is you've got on day 1, right? The first day of the draft, there's going to be 32 picks. So you've got to have 32 players that you would take in the first round. And so I always answer the question we have 32 players in the first round. You have to have at least 32 to pick. Now, is it a situation where maybe the totality of all these players in the first round might not be as talented as another year? Maybe that's the case. But I see a lot of opportunity in this draft class, really, in the middle rounds. I see more players. I see more draftable players. So we have 217 players right now on the front board. And there have been years where we've had a hard time getting to 160, 165. So there's a lot of draftable players. That means that the mid-rounds are going to be really good. And also I think undrafted free agency should have a chance to be really, really good for us. But I really think that if you're going to have 11 picks, this is a year that reminds me a little bit of 2022 from the standpoint of the depth of the draft really across the middle rounds, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th rounds. I think it'll be pretty good. We see a lot of talent in that range. So that's an opportunity for us to get better as a team.
Your thoughts? 217, and you're muted at the moment, but 217 up from what, 160 in previous years at times when they're bottom of the barrel?
Yeah. Well, so that first part of the answer where he's like, oh, I just have 32 people there always, because they were asking if it was talent at the top. And he kind of didn't say much about that part. And he's like, well, I've got to have 32 people there. And so I think he probably agrees. It's not, the star power that we've had in other draft classes at the top, but to have 217 draftable guys when he struggled to get up to 160, we're talking about 50 more players. And that's a lot, especially because in the first round, a lot of people have the same type of grades. But once you start to get in those middle grounds, that's where scouts make their money. That's where GMs make their money. And who are you going to find that are diamonds that nobody else sees? And so he compared it to 2022, where Bobby, he found in rounds 3 through 4, he got himself Travis Jones, Isaiah Likely, nobody else likes him, Daniel Fa'alele, but was a full-time starter, Charlie Kolar, who would be able to do a lot more, but like Isaiah Likely, he just kind of suffers from the fact that there's an embarrassment of riches at the tight end position. Jordan Stout, your punter who hasn't been phenomenal, but got him there. And he's had other great 4th round picks. I remember in 2016, he had a lot of 4th rounders. He got Tavon Young, out of that. I'm trying to think of some others. Mid rounds also include maybe third round. Remember at 2018, they got Orlando Brown and Mark Andrews. Justice Hill is a fourth rounder. Devin Duvernay, who was not a great wide receiver, but obviously a special returner as a Pro Bowler. So Broderick Washington, a fifth rounder. Tylan Wallace, a fourth rounder. Again, nothing huge, but these are all guys that, like, when you have expensive players elsewhere, you need much cheaper young talent at returner or as a backup or this and that. And you need guys who can actually step in if there's an injury. And so he's absolutely right that those are important. And if he can repeat that 2022 scenario where you've gotten Isaiah Likely, a Travis Jones, and a starter on the offensive line, it's critically important, to use his words. It's critical. So hopefully he can repeat that success.
There's also some specific position groups that he went out of his way to single out. And as you tweeted, he mentioned that the offensive line, defensive line, and outside linebackers as a whole are the three strongest positions in this draft class. He also talked at length about the offensive line class on top, which is obviously one of the three that I just mentioned right there that he singled out. And here he is talking about it because a reporter asked him, like, hey, you have a potentially starting five ready to go right now, but that is an area of need when it comes to depth. I mean, go take a look after Fa'alele and Voorhees, what your options are at guard. It's either Ben Cleveland or Darian Dalcourt. So at some point come next weekend, they're going to be bringing in guards. And Eric likes that there's a depth to be had.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I saw a stat the other day that I think we're allocating less salary cap this year to the offensive line than any other team in the league. And that tells me that we have some good young players who are playing well. They're on their rookie contracts. I've got a lot of faith in those guys. I've got a lot of faith in Coach Warhop to develop, and a lot of faith in our strength and conditioning program too, that we bring in these younger offensive linemen, and typically we see that they get better over time. I think it's a good, strong offensive line class this year across the board. A really, really good group of tackles and guards as well. And so, I think that anytime you have a chance to draft an offensive lineman that you think can be a really good player, you should do that, especially the way we play football, because we're a team that prides itself on running the ball and being physical, knocking people off the ball, controlling the clock, protecting the quarterback, all those different things. And so I think that's going to be critical.
And Sarah, at the top of that answer, he gave a comment that you transcribed here about this stat in terms of allocating less salary cap this year to the offensive line than any other team in the league. Well, here you go. Let's go big screen for this. This is from Warren Sharp, who we've often used. Basically, he took a look at the most expensive offensive lines in 25 and just pan your way down to the bottom left, because the Ravens are 32nd, dead last, $19.8 million in terms of what they are allocating dollars-wise to their offensive line in 25. How does that help? Well, some of that helps when you draft well, which they certainly have. They've drafted young and they've developed, like a Roger Rosengarten. Crazy enough, we wouldn't have been saying this last year, like a Daniel Fa'alele, like the usage of void years with Ronnie Stanley's contract, Linderbaum still being on the rookie deal along with Andrew Voorhees. And then the one on the right here is the total capital used to draft offensive linemen since 2022. The Ravens find themselves just above the league average. They're at 14, almost smack dab right in the league average, just above that total draft value of 36, 37 in terms of what where do they stack up league wide. So found those comments to be interesting.
Well, he's right. I don't know if it was this specific stat that I saw, but I saw a few Ravens fans complaining that the Ravens were number 32 in terms of spending at the offensive line. And that just says to me, obviously they're complaining because they're thinking that the Ravens aren't serious about protecting Lamar. But if you don't understand how the salary cap works, you don't understand that being able to be number 32, not in all cases, but certainly in this case, that being able to only to spend the least means that your team put their most valuable assets, which is draft picks, towards the offensive line and protecting Lamar Jackson. Not only did they use those draft picks there, but they hit on it. The reason why the Ravens can get away with only spending $20 million in cap space in 2025 to protect Lamar Jackson is because they hit on Roger Rosengarten. It's because they hit on Tyler Linderbaum, and they singled on Daniel Falele. Is single okay? maybe.
Never know.
But and then on, we don't know who the left guard is going to be. And so that's why he's saying, in this draft class, first of all, he sees some good tackles. So hopefully they're going to be able to get a swing tackle for the backup position. And then maybe he'll be able to find a guard that will compete with Andrew Voorhees. But that whole Linderbaum, Fa'alele, and Roger Rosengarten is why they're number 32. Now, I think they could upgrade from Fa'alele for sure. And again, maybe if they hit on a couple of guards, they will. But it's good news if you can put the vast majority of your money behind your quarterback and be able to hit in the draft over and over and over again. Because a franchise quarterback outside of that rookie deal is uber expensive. Now, we can definitely criticize this team for not taking advantage of Lamar Jackson in his rookie year contracts. That for sure you can criticize him for that, for not getting a Super Bowl while he was on his rookie contract. But you can't criticize him for hitting in the draft and therefore not having to spend on a starting right tackle or a starting center, who are some of the best in the league. Could be Roger Rosengarten. I won't be there. I won't go there yet, but are trending in that direction.
Yeah. So it's nothing to poo-poo that list.
It's something to celebrate.
Well, meaning the list of where they are, though, in terms of knowing what Lamar's on the books for and knowing that they have had some success with cultivating this youth movement, right? That Eric DeCosta essentially preached patience for, by the way, this time last year, or asked, kind of universally asked for patience. And so for them to have that kind of stability now a year later is something to hang their hat on.
Now, to differentiate, you cannot celebrate that. We weren't able to celebrate that at the wide receiver position for decades because they just had a philosophy that it was like, we're not spending at wide receiver. They don't have that philosophy on offensive line. They've spent much higher in the past, but it's because they hit, especially at right tackle and center. Whereas with the wide receivers in the past, they're like, well, we're just not spending there. And they were like swing and a miss over and over and over again at wide receiver. So when the wide receivers were at number 32, that was bad news because they weren't drafting well and they weren't willing to spend. On the offensive line, they are willing to spend, but they don't have to because they hit, especially on center and right tackle.
Couple more draft nuggets coming up for you, including edge rusher and the potential of going after a tight end,
real quick,
you have.
Before we do that, Bobby, just because I didn't get a chance, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I got to interrupt you though, because I got to jump.
Okay, go ahead and jump. Go ahead and jump. Yeah.
I'm going to my dentist office, get dental appointment at 2:30, and you're going to take everybody home. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem. Good luck. Hope there's no cavities or whatever's going on over there.
Me too. Need a new retainer too, so more to come.
All right. Good luck.
Appreciate you. Bye-bye.
See ya. So anyway, I just wanted to back up here to talk about this quote right here where Eric DeCosta said that the offensive line, defensive line, and outside linebackers as a whole are the three strongest positions in this draft class. That's good news that lines up with some of the Ravens' biggest needs, at least as I see them. Now, Eric DeCosta was quick to point out, and I'll play this audio in a second, point out that his entire outside linebacker core is coming back, every single one of them. But we know that Odafe Owe and Kyle Van Noy are not under contract beyond 2025, so they have to start building for the future. But on top of that, we all know that there's room for more talent. As much as we love that Kyle Van Noy and Odafe had double-digit sacks last year, we know that we need more talent, like influx. Let's go. Let's get more. The more, the merrier. And if possible, get a game record. I don't know that that's possible at number 27, but that's what you would like to see, 27 or beyond. So it's good news. Defensive line, Michael Pierce. He's retired now. They did not re-sign Brent Urban, so you need a defensive end. And so nice to hear that about the defensive line. And then offensive line, we all believe they can upgrade at both guard positions. And on top of that, it wouldn't hurt to find a tackle of the future. We know we're in good hands with Ronnie and Roger Rosengarten for now. But if Ronnie were to get injured again, you need somebody who can step in. Probably Roger would move to the left, and then maybe you could put a rookie in over at the right. There's also George Fant, which I know they're looking at in the veteran, or reportedly looking at in the veteran free agent market. But those three big needs, or those three strengths of the draft, line up pretty well. Like it's fine that quarterback is not one of the strongest positions. That's not what the Ravens are in the market for. It's fine that running back isn't one of the strongest positions. That's not what they're in the market for, but they could use those three. In terms of cornerback, Eric DeCosta was asked if he feels like that's a need, even though he just got a first rounder with Nate Wiggins last year. He reiterated what he always says, that you can never, ever, ever have enough cornerbacks. And he talks about how when they had played the Steelers a couple years ago, they were quickly down. I think he said 21 or 27-0. And he was like, not to disparage anybody, but we had a lot of corners that were playing because of injury. And he's like, 1 minute you feel like the cupboard is stocked, and this next minute you feel like it's empty. And so he said, quote, I feel pretty sure we'll at least take one corner in the draft. So he said that about corner. He has said that about safety. Seems like he feels that way about the offensive line. So feeling pretty good about those situations. He was asked specifically about that pass rusher class. Here's what he had to say.
I do think it's a good draft class. Now, if I'm not mistaken, we've got our entire outside linebacker core coming back this year. So that's a great situation for us because we didn't lose anybody. And so from that standpoint, I think it's good. Now, again, there are some really talented guys in this draft class. And, you know, there are guys that we'll be looking at as first-round guys, second-round guys, third-round guys, fourth-round guys we think could come in and compete to really play right away or develop and become really good players. So that's exciting for us. I think that if you're looking at the offensive line, the defensive line, and the, outside linebackers as a whole, I would say they're three of the strongest positions in this draft class.
So there he is reiterating it again. In terms of tight end, we already know Charlie Kolar and Isaiah Likely don't get as many opportunities as they would on other teams. That's a good problem to have, obviously. But even though they're good there, we know that Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews are not under contract beyond 2025. And so is it possible that he could go ahead and take a tight end this year? He was open to that depending on who's there.
I just think it depends on the player. Like, there are some really good players in this. And the same could be said about the running back position as well. And we've talked about that. We talk about these things all the time. And the reality of it is if there's like a tight end that we think is a blue chip tight end or a running back that we think is a blue chip running back, we're going to take them just because they're important. And if the talent is such that we think this guy can impact our team at some point.
All right, so he's open to that, obviously, but that's what you always, got to say. I don't think they're out looking for tight ends, but that would probably play into what we talked about at the top of the show of Mark Andrews. He left the door open. If Mark Andrews is traded, then obviously you got to go and draft some tight ends for sure. So let's hit up some super chats before I hit quick hits and close things out. So Sod Blitz says we want, in all caps, an elite edge, but outside of Carter, there isn't one. We need a starting DB. Clearly our biggest weakness last year, and it hasn't been addressed. And Sod I think Eric basically said to you, he said to us, I think he's seen it the same way. We will draft at least one safety and we will draft at least one cornerback. So when they do that, obviously will impact it, that pass defense pretty significantly. But I agree that what hasn't been addressed. Obviously they signed Cheeto. But is that going to be everything that you need? Probably not, which is why they will head to the draft. And I agree with you. I don't know that the Ravens, we've been talking about how the Ravens need a game-wrecking pass rusher. Because right now they have a lot of solid guys. You have two double-digit guys or two double-digit sack guys. That's solid. That's more than solid. But when it comes to getting over the hump, I think Mel Kiper said it well when we pulled a soundbite of his in yesterday's show. He was asked what it would take for the Ravens to get over the hump in the playoffs. And he said, you've got to be able to close out games because the offense is usually able to jump out in front. And the best way that you can close out games is with the pass rusher, is to put pressure on the opposing quarterback. We saw that with the Eagles against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now you can do that with guys on the inside too. And so that's why knowing that the defensive line is deep, if you're able to get somebody of the mold that just isn't a run stuffer, which is important, but you can get pass rush from up the middle, that oftentimes makes quarterbacks more uncomfortable than when the pressure's coming out of the edge, because they can just step up, maybe try to evade the pressure. But once they're coming up the middle, you got to start running out to the edges. Lamar Jackson can handle that, but not necessarily all the other quarterbacks that aren't as elusive as Lamar Jackson is. So I hear you on that. Let's see here. Sod Blitz again. Thank you. He said, we needed cornerback, safety, and kick returner, but that unicorn is now in Philadelphia. Rave Kingdom. He says, are you waving a finger here or putting up the finger, number one? It says, no, they hit on center and right tackle. They hit on center and right tackle. That's it. There's 5 linemen. They hit 2 out of 5 in math class. That's failing. Fa'alele, throw up. Anyways, Ben Cleveland. We're arguing semantics at this point with Fa'alele. I might have been one of the biggest critics of Fa'alele throughout the year, and I was shocked at how far he came. But even how far he came, that started with a very low standard. And so he came far, but he started pretty low. But it's hard for me to term somebody a miss when they're a 17-game starter. It's hard for me to do that. Even though I feel like the Ravens could absolutely upgrade there. And I think Ben Cleveland might be categorized as an upgrade. I know Rave Kingdom would feel that way. All right. Let's see here. More. Let me get this off the screen. Couple quick hits here. Rashad Bateman tweeting recently, know your worth. So I don't know what he's alluding to there. I know Bobby pulled this one in, but he's for sure under contract. So I don't know that that's what he's talking about here, but know your worth. Know what you're capable of doing. Glad he's feeling confident. Did you guys see him shooting jumpers the other day? I think Bobby tweeted that. Not a bad basketball player there. Let's see here. The last quick hit of the slideshow here. Ian Rappaport says that the Dolphins and 7-time Pro Bowl cornerback Jalen Ramsey are mutually set to explore trade options And it wouldn't be a surprise if he played elsewhere in 2025, per me and Tom Pelissero. Said Miami and Ramsey do $25.1 million fully guaranteed this season, could be parting ways. Okay, now hold on a second. I need to look up, since this is on the fly, I need to look up how much of that is his base salary, because that is what the trading team would be on the hook for. It's a lot of guaranteed money. Okay, in 2025, here, I'll share this what I'm looking at with you guys. Okay. There we go. Try to zoom in here. So Jalen Ramsey, how do I get this ad off? So annoying. In 2025, only has a base salary of $1.25 million. That's something you could deal with, for sure. In 2026, that goes up to 10 million, and then 2027 is another 10 million. 2028 is off the charts. But where's the dead money? But it's not bad dead money. Only 5 million dead money if you wanted to move on from there. Woo! All right, chat. How would you guys feel about Ramsey? Is this right here? His base salary, 1.2 million in 2025? That's really low. All right, chat saying not worth his money, but again, that money's not bad. That base salary, that's what the trading team would pick up. They don't pick up the whole cap hit. His cap hit is 16 million. But it's look at this. The Miami would be eating 50 million in dead cap space. Maybe they would be looking for a trading team to try to pick up some of that. But that money's not bad. All right. Some people calling Jalen Ramsey washed and that he got cooked. No, says Adam. Yes, says some others. We got a split chat here. I guess here's the question for you, because again, the base salaries are not bad. So what are they looking for in terms of like draft pick compensation? Obviously, that plays a big part of this. But the question that you have to ask is Jalen Ramsey an upgrade over, I guess he would be like Cheeto is who he'd be kicking out, right? Because you would have Nate Wiggins on the outside, Cheeto on the outside, and then Marlon Humphrey playing that nickelback. And so if you bring in Ramsey, he'd be on the outside. Now, they could draft somebody. They could draft somebody high. I don't know that they would do that 2 years in a row, but they are certainly in a position in the first round to just take best player available. And so the question is Jalen Ramsey an upgrade over Cheeto? Because that base salary is easily covered. Easily. You know? But it is for the next 4 years a deal that you'd have to cover. But again, corners at 10 million aren't a ton, and you would probably want to cut them by 2028 for sure, because that 21 million base salary is way too much. Way too much. But it's really not that expensive if you consider him a starting cornerback. So I have not been watching Ramsey too much the last couple of years. So the greatness asking a good question. Are we trading picks for Ramsey in this scenario? That's major. The contract doesn't seem too crazy of a problem. It's more, what are they looking for in terms of draft compensation? And at the end of the day, the market's going to determine that. Would they want to do a player trade? So I don't know. Draft wise, the Ravens picked up Marcus Peters for a fifth rounder? Would you trade a fifth rounder for Jalen Ramsey? Would you do a fifth rounder for Jalen Ramsey and knowing that his base salary is basically $1.25 million next year? Fifth rounder, I could do that. I could. I've been told by Ravens Twitter in the chat that you don't need all 11 of those picks. Eric DeCosta was asked about whether he wants to use all 11 of those picks, and he said, you know, we like to have a lot of, we need a lot of young infusion of young talent because of the other players that they're paying. Lamar, Roquan, Humphrey, all that kind of stuff. But he also said he liked the flexibility that 11 draft picks would give him. So you got 11 draft picks, Marcus Peters for a fifth rounder, because you get Jalen Ramsey for the same. And then it's a $1.25 million cap hit in 2025, goes up to $10 million the next 2 years. I don't think that would be too expensive. But again, I haven't been watching him. And so I don't know, is the chat exaggerating that he's washed and that he's been cooked? I don't know. I haven't been watching him. But I don't think the price would have to be too much. All right. Let's see. We got one more super chat that came in. Then we'll close things out. Hayes09 says, number 77, I hope he overperforms and gets his big payday because I know EDC wants that comp pick from him after his final rookie contract year coming up. 77, that's Falele, right? Let me just do this. Just want to make sure that that is Daniel Falele. I think that's who it is. Images here. We need two people here so I can do this. Yeah, 77 is Daniel Falele. There we go. I hope he overperforms and gets his big yeah, for sure. Yeah, we would like a comp pick for Daniel Falele. Wasn't he a fourth rounder? Let him go get paid elsewhere. And that's why, again, you want to have a good draft where either you replace him this year or you have somebody developing to replace him next year and they can slide right in. Slide right in. All right, let's see if we can get to, let me see if he left me the patrons. I think I got it right here. Want to thank our patrons, Nishad and Kelly. We appreciate you supporting the vault and everything that we're doing here. I also give a shout out to the YouTube members. Appreciate you guys supporting us. And yeah, I think that was not the most insightful press conference that we just got, which we knew would happen. They call it a liar's luncheon for a reason. So we will know in about 10 days how many smoke screens EDC was putting out. Sometimes he tells the truth. He has said before that you can't lie all the time or people know that you're lying all the time. So sometimes he drops a couple of truth bombs in there. Which parts were truthful and which were not, I do not know. But appreciate you guys for joining us here. Bobby and I will be back tomorrow at noon. We'll go back to our regular scheduled noon program. Thank you for being patient and giving us about 45 minutes to turn around that hour-long press conference and try to put it in a way that is coherent and offers at least semi-good analysis. Hopefully we've done that for you. So appreciate you guys, and I will see you here with Bobby tomorrow inside the vault at 1 p.m. Have a good one.